So hi everyone. Just to remind you, my name is Dr. Michelle Fort. I'm an assistant professor with SUNY Empire State College in New York. And I am very pleased to be joined this afternoon by Tom Lindsley. Tom is the Director of Federal Government Relations for ACT in Washington, D.C. And he has most generously he's willing to he's willing to share his expertise with us today with respect to some of the topics we're covering. So Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no, we're thrilled. So I wondered if you could start by just giving our learners, our viewers, a sense of your background, what brought you to this work, and maybe we can just start with that as a context and go from there.
Sure. I work in Washington as a satellite office of ACT based in Iowa City. Mm-hmm. It's a national nonprofit working with individuals, helping them kind of achieve both education but workforce success as well. Mm-hmm. Provides a whole variety of sources of information and research and tools to help individuals identify the skills they need mm-hmm. or the skills they have. My own background, I was a liberal arts major, so there is some hope there. And I got started by working on a political campaign after school, after I finished my graduate degree, and was able to meet a number of the state's political delegation and got a job shortly after that, mm-hmm. More of an internship and mm-hmm. job, but that led one thing to another to begin to learn the intricacies of the federal legislative and policy-making mm-hmm. processes mm-hmm. That could help me move into, in effect, a lobbying position, mm-hmm. Working with government affairs. So mm-hmm. That's how I got there, basically. And I will come back to that move from school to job by having some sort of demonstrable experience in the workplace mm-hmm. as we move along here.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So thank you. So you've given us then a little bit of a hint of your trajectory. So I wonder then if you could speak to ACT, the issues, maybe that ACT hopes to respond to. What challenges is it trying to solve? Just give us an overview maybe of the organization.
Sure. ACT it works all along the continuum of education and workforce mm-hmm. development. So we have research and tools available to educators in the K-12 space, mm-hmm. transitioning from grade 8 to middle school mm-hmm. to high school transitioning to post-secondary education as well as job training, and tools to help individuals all across those difficult transitions at times. Mm-hmm. So it involves researching emerging and ongoing issues that need help to overcome, providing the tools that we feel are based on evidence and research that will help people. Mm-hmm. It's all based on the latest science and research protocols. We have a whole army of industrial psychologists and psychometricians who help build these tools with a lot of integrity. So what we find by individuals using these solutions is very helpful in building a database mm-hmm. available publicly for others to look at mm-hmm. And sort of assess their own skills or career interests, really, along the trajectory of those research dimensions that we have. So ACT is a national nonprofit, so we really are mission-driven, mm-hmm. and that drives our research and our curiosity in trying to stay ahead of these rapidly growing segments right. of society. Right. The rapid change in the workplace as well mm-hmm. as different skill levels that are needed even to succeed in post-secondary education.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that last piece to which you just referred, the sort of the rapidity with which this landscape, I guess with a capital L, changes, I think that's really interesting, and it speaks to some of the topics we've we've discussed even in this first part of our course. So I guess I'm interested in how you used a phrase, psychometrics, and I think we'll maybe get back to that in a little bit. Um, but I wonder how, given that changing, shifting landscape, given the sort of, now we're 15 years into the 21st century, but we still appeal to the 21st century. How do organizations like ACT work with industry, work with job seekers, work with higher ed, and then sort of balancing what each group maybe has to offer, what each group can learn from one another? It sounds like a little bit of a balancing act. You're trying to get from one group to inform another. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it is based largely on ensuring that our work has validity.
Right.
Is anchored in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Real world, not only for expectations,
Mm-hmm.
but real world standards, achievement levels, etc. So, as an example, I'll give you two examples. One is the transition from high school to post-secondary education, where we every 3 years update our what we call a national curriculum survey, and it's a very detailed effort that researches secondary school teachers as well as post-secondary entry-level course teachers to match their expectations and their judgment of the readiness of their students. And we always find it a mismatch. Largely, mismatch is that high school teachers feel their students are ready for post-secondary education up in the 80% range. Post-secondary instructors who get these students into first-year credit-bearing colleges, or credit-bearing courses, will say that 23% of them will agree that they're ready for college work. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge mismatch, and then we have to define what it comprises that mismatch. What content levels are missing? What knowledge needs to be enriched? What increased levels of knowledge need to be addressed in order to balance out that mismatch? Mm-hmm. And that results in setting academic benchmarks for readiness coming out of high school, and that enables our researchers then to back map those benchmarks into the earlier grades so that you have some tools to see whether you're on track to be ready by the time you graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. Similarly, in order to ensure that workforce solutions are helpful to individuals trying to get into the workforce, instead of gathering a lot of smart experts around the table in a particular industry, for example, and say, well, what skills do you need? We actually go into the workplace and work with those individuals who hold those jobs to define the exact skills that are essential to succeed in that job. Mm-hmm. We're able to identify those skills for the employer even. We're able to determine the relative priority of those skills among each other, mm-hmm. the most important, and also to determine what level of skill among those on the list are essential for succeeding in that job. And we can put together a lot of detailed research and information about jobs across the country. And over a period of decades, we've been able to accumulate these individual analyses of jobs into a national database, and we find common threads among the skills employers need across all of those jobs, and that helps define some of the tools we're able to provide to individuals in navigating that landscape. And we're constantly updating that database because there are all new occupations coming on every year. There are new skills that are needed, and that all needs to be built into the database.
Right. Yeah. No, so I mean, I think those are really great examples because it demonstrates the complexity of your task. So you're sort of at once, I think you used the phrase backmapping. So you're thinking about where today's, I'll just choose a random grade, maybe today's 7th grader or 6th grader or 5th grader might need to be by the time she or he graduates from high school in order to be ready for whatever that next transition is, right? Which would necessitate some pretty well-researched intelligence about what that landscape will look like when that graduate or student arrives on the scene. And then currently you're having to take a look at that 60, I think it's 60% mismatch between what teachers think their students can do and what actually ends up presenting. I mean, that's a pretty significant mismatch between the two. So that. I think that the research piece that you're doing and other organizations like yours are doing is crucial to help all of us translate what we're doing in one venue to another.
I would agree. The more information you have, the better you're going to be able to navigate that landscape. And frankly, that's becoming a more important skill for individuals coming out of their educational experience or their educational career. Having the skills to be able to navigate the world you're entering for whatever you want to do is an important skill to develop. Finding the information resources, talking to people who can help you most.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and it's something we've thought a lot about as well. So it's not only the actual, competencies or knowledge or skills, but it's the ability to do all of that to begin with. So there's sort of a skill on top of the skill set. It's the navigation and arming people with the navigation. But so speaking of skills and competencies, in your estimation or to your research, what are some of those key skills and competencies? It sounds like you've had some pretty interesting results with respect to distilling down what presents over and over again as, so we hear portable skills, transferable skills, etc. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, the skills that emerge from our research that are common across most occupational fields are the kinds of skills that we would probably term portable. I'll give you an example of another document to look at where a broad range of occupational industry groups got together to identify the core skills that they look for in their occupational fields and distill the commonalities among those into a single document, and that's available publicly as well. We'll be able to provide that resource. But the kinds of skills that we assess regularly for employers and for individuals to kind of determine where they might need to work on their skills are divided generally between what we call cognitive skills that are things such as thinking and reasoning, remembering, as well as the conscious intellectual skills, what you know. And then the non-cognitive skills, which are a little harder to define, but they're the ones that are called the soft skills. They're associated with an individual's attitudes, their habits, their behaviors, their disciplines. And those are a different set of skills, but increasingly important skills that employers look for in hiring individuals into their workplace. So to go back to the cognitive categories of skills, what you know that seem most common across any occupational field, we find relate to applied mathematics, a very basic foundation in mathematics in ways that can be applied to the tasks and problems you face in a workplace, budgeting, etc. Another is what we call reading for information, and this is the ability to read a lot of information that you'll find in the workplace, distill the essential elements out of it, read a corporate-wide memo, for example, and know exactly what the new policies are corporate-wide, etc. And finally, a category of skills that, for lack of a better term, we call locating information, but it's not as simple as that. It's really using all the documentation you find in a workplace, whether it's gauges, tables, charts, blueprints, spreadsheets, being able to look at the variety of information displays you'll find in the workplace, analyze them, and learn how to use it to solve the problem that you're assigned in your job. And all of those categories of skills are measurable, and we do that for business. The other kinds of skills, just quickly, that we can assess, deal with applied technology skills, business writing, listening for understanding, an important skill in the workplace, teamwork, workplace observation, things like that. And they correlate almost exactly to this, what I was going to refer to as a common employability skills framework that was put together by this large group of industry organizations that is available online. And it's billed as the skills all employers need no matter where they work. And it outlines this mix of cognitive, non-cognitive skills that most employers say are essential for success in today's workplace.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, I'm sort of hanging on your every word because sometimes sort of, out in the field, out in this world, there's almost a ubiquitous reference to non-cognitive soft skills, however, whatever the phrasing, whatever the phraseology is. And then I've heard some in the field say, well, but you can't really measure it. You can't really, you just sort of know it when you see it, right? The joke is professors often say, well, we know an A paper when we read one, which is decidedly unhelpful both to writer and to anyone else who's trying to replicate your practice, right? So it sounds to me like you've honed in on some of the important pieces of what these competencies actually look like, how they express in the workplace, and that they in fact can be learned. Can you maybe, I'm assuming that my interpretation is correct. Could you speak to that, or?
Yeah, there are priorities among those soft skills that employers look for.
Right.
Just to illustrate some of the skills that we've identified and are able to assess and able to provide curriculum for, frankly, are things like creativity and discipline, goodwill, organization and order, sociability, stability, customer service, how careful you are in the workplace in terms of thinking through what you're going to say before you say it. Goodwill, just attitudes toward goodwill. Workplace, thinking of your business colleagues and others you work with on your team. So we're able to even look at some of the more negative behaviors like absenteeism and resilience to work stress and things like that. Those are individual skills. You can learn how to better those skills on your own. We have curriculum that helps back that up, as do other people, really. But those kinds of behaviors and disciplines, habits, really, are learnable. And increasingly, we're finding that educators are building them in to their instructional practices, in the way they teach, maybe through a project-based learning or work-based learning where you have more experience with actual employer interaction. Environments where you can expose students to these kinds of skills that they may not get if they're isolated in a school environment, just going through lectures and writing papers and doing what they're told to do, but they don't develop those kinds of interpersonal skills that become increasingly important.
Right. I'm having a memory, I think, of another conversation you and I may have had on another webinar about learning spreadsheets. Was it you? I'm thinking that this is ringing very familiar to me because the conversation was something like this. So we teach students, we teach employees in transition, whatever the cohort, skills, etc. But they're they're without context, and it's only in the application of these of the knowledge of the skills, the competencies that actually an individual can practice and hone and understand the connection between the theory or the assignment and what that bucket looks like in the real world. And that's where the real competency comes into play. And without that, we're sort of teaching in a void, almost a vacuum.
That's right. And many students find it hard just to memorize what they're learning in the classroom without having used it in some way that embeds it in practicality of the real world. So increasingly, I think the notion of using applied learning techniques in the classroom is growing in the K-12 education experience as well as in post-secondary. And we've discussed this before, but in post-secondary education, particularly education that's leading to a particular career pathway, there is often greater effort to build partnerships with employers early in that academic pathway so that individual students can take what they know in the classroom or go to the employer and see what that looks like in the workplace. They get some very practical exposure for how mathematics, for example, is used in technology applications in the workplace for quality control, for whatever.
Right.
There are much more persuasive instructional techniques beginning to emerge that focus exactly on what you pointed out, which is the applied learning, the applied use of knowledge that demonstrates to employers more clearly what your skills are.
Right, right, and probably speaks a little bit more to what your research shows in terms of those competencies and the characteristics to which employers turn for a potential hire, right? A potential employee. I wonder too if it would address some of that 60% mismatch that we have between what students are or are not doing in the classroom and then what employers see when individuals turn up for a job. I think it's really interesting. The applied piece is a fascinating, untapped. I know that the State University of New York is certainly charging all of our campuses with applied learning opportunities, and it sounds like we're in line with what your research is showing.